So I was checking for something good to watch. I didn't see anything except this intrigued me. It's called The Conservation Game. So I checked it out. Those of you who are up to date on everything probably knew about this. I'm not like you guys up on every little thing that happened, so I wasn't. But it intrigued me, and I thought it looked kind of interesting, so I checked it out. And I became fascinated with it. So I highly recommend you find it and watch it. A little background. I won't do any spoilers. I won't ruin anything for you. But I'll just give you some background. This one, it's a gentleman named Tim Harrison who starts to do a bit of an investigation into wildlife animals and them going on these different shows. And it's directed by Michael Weber. I don't know, never heard of either of them, but he seemed like a good guy. Now, some larger background. When I grew up, every Saturday on the TV was Marlon Perkins, Mutual of Omaha. You couldn't get away from it. It was like the only show on TV worth watching, so everybody watched it. I've been a cynical person ever since I was a young kid, and I remember asking those I was watching with, how is it that they happen to have the camera positioned in the perfect place to capture the animals? You got to remember, back then we weren't, as a populace, cynical. We were just naive, and so nobody had the answer. But after years of this happening, we kind of started to say to ourselves, something's not right, because it was just, the camera was just perfectly positioned, and you would think in the wild that was just coincidence, maybe once or twice, but after that many times, you just had to know it was more than coincidence. It was staged, and it wasn't until many years later that we finally got the evidence that it was staged. I mean, it was perfectly staged. But back then, we were naive, so don't say, well, why didn't you know? Back then, we didn't know, just so in case you're wondering. Then it extended to the sea. We had Jacques Cousteau. This guy was hailed as the Mr. Ocean. You know, he knew everything about the ocean, and we thought he was great too. We wouldn't find out till years later that he wasn't the greatest guy. I was just about to say what it was, but maybe I'll just put a link in. You can read it for yourself. Not the greatest guy around. And then, as the movie will show you, the documentary will show you, there was other people who the characters were a little more well-rounded, let's say. There was Jack Hanna, became the face of the animals, and you'll see what happens with him. I won't spoil it. I just remember him being on every talk show, and I mean everyone, from Letterman to Good Morning America to just about anyone who had a camera on TV. Jack Hanna was on it. And then there was, then it kind of changed into Steve Irwin. Then he was on everywhere. They don't really feature Steve Irwin in this one, so I won't say anything about him. So that's a bit of the background as to what is going on. But in the meantime, what happened was many, many documentaries. There was Sharkwater, trying to think of ones that come to mind. I like that one. There was The Cove in Japan. The one that just came out recently, if my memory can help me quickly, I think it was called Seaspiracy. That was done in conjunction with a great Canadian in charge of Sea Shepherd. Paul Watson, I think his name is. And so all these documentaries started coming out, and now there's this one. And before that, my friend told me to watch Joe Exotic. So I watched that. I found it interesting. But then I was embarrassed when I mentioned it to an Argentinian girl out in Spain. She said, "Oh, is that the one with the crazy guy?" And I kind of felt embarrassed that I even watched it. The way she put it, made it clear. But I wanted to know what everybody was talking about, so I watched it. So that's interspersed into this one in the middle and then at the end. So I won't tell you what happens, but it is weaved into this documentary because it relates to it. So this one has to do with the Big Cat Species Act, and they focus on Jack Hanna, Craig Ketterman, a gentleman who I never heard of, and then another gentleman, Dave Salmoni, who I'm only vaguely familiar with, but I looked up his name online before and I found out a bit about him, and I know a bit about him. They went down to see him in Toronto. He didn't think he was on camera, and they spoke to him about this issue. So there's those three people, and then it kind of gives you information, and then it follows kind of like a thriller to see what happens, and he presents it that way. So I thought it was very good. I highly recommend you watch it. It's just under 2 hours long, and it will bring together all the things that you have heard or seen or know about in the animal world. I've been saying for years that we should stop zoos. People should stop going to them. I won't make any comments other than that. You can decide for yourself. I just know, after speaking to enough people, I've realized if you're ignorant, and I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean if you don't know, then you'll think there's nothing wrong with zoos. And it's when you start doing the research, when you start seeing what goes on, the more you become familiar with them, the more you go to the side that we should stop zoos completely. And there are some shows and information that will demonstrate this to you beyond the shadow of a doubt. So I'll leave it there. Lots of information in there for you, but it's more of a thriller where it's set up for you, and then he starts researching, and it's kind of like can he come to the end before the documentary comes to the end, and it will keep you interested from beginning to end. I thought it was very well done, and the gentleman did a very good job. He was fair. He gave people lots of time to come up with answers, and he didn't try to do any of these gotcha moments and surprise people. But the one thing I was shocked, and I wish he had have done this, is the accountability of these talk shows from, what's his name, Jimmy Fallon, all these people on the show and the NBC, Hoda Kotb and Kathy Lee Gifford. I would have liked to see him go to these people and ask them about their culpability. I thought that would have been very interesting. Of course, they can always say, well, it's my research assistants who handle that, and Robin Givens too, who handle it. But they must have known. You will not get me to believe that they were just oblivious or not culpable in this. They must have known what was going on, and I would have liked to see them held accountable in some way, even if it was only to answer some questions with a camera in their face. I would have liked to have seen that, but I guess he's got to be careful what he does, or for whatever reason he didn't do it. I would have liked to have seen that. So there you go. It's called The Conservation Game, 2-hour documentary about big cats and animals, but mostly focused on big cats, where they're kept, and why they're allowed to be treated the way they are. Bye-bye.